Hello and welcome to another episode of Not Another Recruitment Marketing Podcast. My name's Brian Whigham, for those of you who don't know me by now, the founder of Venn. And today we have another special guest, Jon Dennis from S6 Photography, who's going to be talking about the trials and tribulations of being a photographer and how his transition from the world of wedding photography has inspired hopefully a new style of photography that you can trial out on a recruitment agency website through to any corporate style photography shoot. So without much further ado, Jon, introduce yourself to the guys, tell us who you are, a little bit about your background and what you're doing nowadays.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. So my name's Jon. I started a company, S6 Photography, 14 years ago now. So when I started, I kind of didn't really have a specific line of photography that I was doing. I'd always just been sort of artistic. So I went through my school years and A-level years, very arty, but not really knowing sort of how to use it in the real world. And I ended up then actually spending a decade selling IT. So I worked in the IT sector for a decade, and then sort of refound a love of art through photography. That was really through kind of having my own wedding and looking up wedding photography. So at that point, I was just going around really and taking photos of sort of real life around the house, just things happening, the dog, kind of, just stuff like that. And then when I took a look at sort of the wedding photography that was out there, it was just so boring. It was really just cheesy and fake and false. And I just thought to myself, you know what, I can do something better than this. And I started really by hijacking some sort of friends of friends' weddings, did 2 or 3 of those, put the photos on the internet with just a really basic website. Back then Apple used to do some software where you could, it had inbuilt software to build your own website. And I put something online and then it flew. As soon as it was on Facebook, it flew from there really. And then that was the start. And I didn't know what direction I was going in. I was kind of doing some fashion shoots as well and taking photos of people's pets and the odd bit of commercial. And then just weddings sort of took off very, very fast. And I removed all of the other stuff from my website and just focused right on weddings. And then really throughout the course sort of my career, I've always met, been introduced to businesses via sort of my couples. They would sort of say, Jon was really good at our wedding, etc. Bring him in to do whatever we need in terms of commercial photography. And I've always sort of been doing it, really in the background to weddings throughout the course of the 14 years. So I've shot for many, many, many businesses. And now I'm at the point, I've done weddings for 14 years. I'm not getting any younger. Weddings are staying the same age pretty much. I don't want to be the old guy in the corner. So I'm gradually kind of building a bit of a transition over to more of a commercial space, sort of doing that a bit in the background, ready to launch a new business that's going to focus on rebranding of visual aspects through photography and video as well into businesses and giving them that sort of more tailored option to improve what they're doing, really. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm building that up throughout the course of this year. I'm going to put it out there properly later in the year, I think. So yeah, that's a short introduction to me.
So if you don't know the theme of the podcast, we try to meet people from out with the recruitment sector to inspire those that maybe who are thinking about designing, building, marketing their website, their brand, their business. It's a challenge. So I think I tried to meet people who come from other walks of life, other industries, to inspire those in recruitment, because it can be hard. A recruitment agency typically is working on behalf of another product, another brand, which is a person, a business. It's not their product per se. You're marketing a CV, you're marketing a career, you're marketing another company's vacancies. So how on earth can that recruitment agency itself build a brand when they're just marketing other people's stuff? So that's why I kind of draw a lot of similarities to e-commerce, because it's fundamentally the same. You're getting online shops just selling other people's stuff, but they still try and build their own brand. And what does that look like and feel like? I think so. The second challenge is it's people. I think with Apple, they can sell beautiful photography. They can sell
Exactly. Yeah.
beautiful websites. Whereas when you're kind of selling people, the challenge will be it's headshots, it's real people, real situations. Not everybody wants to go in front of the camera.
Mm.
Not every location is that interesting. And I think this sort of classification of boring corporate headshots, it's been around for such a long time. So I guess the first question to you, John, on that type of brief is, how can we inspire? I think if people are looking to add real authenticity to the website, they want to add real photography to the website because that's a new brand strategy they're headed. What should they consider? What could they think about? And where could you maybe draw inspiration from wedding shoots, e-commerce shoots, fashion shoots to bring that into the world of B2B to make it interesting and make it feel real?
I think it reminds me of when the whole reason why I got into this, really, when I was looking at wedding photography sort of back then, it was so boring. It was just exactly what you would expect a wedding photo to be, and why nobody was particularly interested in it. It was just nothing lifelike about it. It wasn't real or anything like that. So when I started, I've had the same style from day one. It had to be real and lifelike. Like that's, you wanted to see the personality in there, and it not just to be your typical what you would expect shot. And that's why I started. And for me, it just flew from doing something different, from something that was more relatable to couples. And I would just get so many couples just flooded in immediately. That's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want. And back then, it didn't really exist. There was no one else kind of doing it. And I think it's probably still quite similar over here, really, from a commercial aspect, that you just have the expectancy, of what a shot should look like. And if you go on the American sites, like you said, if you go on Apple and stuff like, it's just all so different. It's far more relatable. And from a wedding photography perspective, we were always behind America and what America did, like 3, 4, 5 years behind. Then the change would come over here to the UK. And if you can be ahead of that, then you're getting yourself ahead of the game straight away, and that's what I did with weddings. My style was sort of very, very American, very Australian, far more, relatable to real life.
Brilliant.
And I think
how can you paint that picture? Because I understand what you mean, but I think for to paint that picture, I think the sort of British business look was always suits, shirts, and ties, whereas Americans were chinos, polo shirts, always seemed more relaxed, tanned, and happier looking than we were in the UK. I think again a lot of the international businesses and therefore weddings could be outside a lot of the time, and it was more real life. It wasn't just stuck inside a Manchester rainy office. So again, how can you relate some of when you go into a shoot now and you're planning that shoot? What do you consider? What do you think about? And how can we give some hints and tips to people who are thinking about photography for their business?
Yeah, so I would say, like, once upon a time, you would go in and you would set up the studio backdrop, right? And you would remove the company and what they were about from that, and you would just make it purely about the photo and about it just looking as simple and dull as it can, right? And now, if you look at the American way of doing things, it's all about being in the right environment, being in their environment, so you can see kind of where they're working, where that CEO is working, where the HR department are working. It's all just far more relatable by seeing them in their own environments, in nice light. Not kind of, you can tell straight away when a shoot's just got studio lights on it, making it the perfect portrait kind of thing. But how does that become relatable to someone just wanting to know a bit more about that person, that company, what they're like? You can't see anything if you're just removing all of that. So for me, you've got to bring all that back into it, and I think that's certainly what they do in America.
And when you're working with businesses, do you give them guidance on how do you scope out the location? Because one of the questions we often get asked is, look, we want photography, but our office is boring. It is what it is. I think we definitely don't want pictures of people sat at their desk smiling. That's some Janet in accounts. It's far from what we want to do. So I think when we're considering the brand of the business, when we're considering the sort of image they want to portray and the types of headshots that we can create, do you have a bit of a checklist where it's maybe about location, where their office is situated, is in the countryside? If it's in London, can we get the London skyline? Like, how do you begin to create a bit of a checklist of the opportunities that photo shoot may bring?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it obviously all depends on the business and stuff. So, there's no point suggesting moving to a location that, if you're a city company, you don't want to be in the countryside doing photos, right? There's no relation there, and sort of vice versa. So, yeah, I'll ask them a little bit about, their environment, where they are, what it's like. Obviously, it is important to understand if they think it's suitable for how they want to portray their business as well, sort of where they're at, some businesses are looking to expand and move into different places, and they don't want to reflect an old image of their company, etc. So yeah, exactly that. A bit of a checklist. Sort of ask them what the lighting's like, if they can take some shots on their phone and send them through to me, so I can have a little look beforehand, and then we can start building some ideas. And also, some companies sort of don't have a HQ for an office these days. They've got remote workers working all over the place, and it's a discussion about how they want to represent that working environment as well. So some companies, might hire a hotel, for example, that they feel like is going to be a suitable environment to how they want their business to look. Some want that to look kind of like cool and sleek. And yeah, like you say, if you're a London company, you want to see some form of sort of iconic London in there. They want to be able to tell that there's that you're in London. Otherwise, you could be anywhere, I guess, and stuff like that sort of helps them maybe sometimes look a bit more of a global brand as well. London's a city that everybody's going to relate with, and they know the sort of some of the key things that you'll see in the skyline. So that definitely helps for a company that sort of wants to look big and exciting and bigger than they might actually be, for example. But yeah.
Staging the brand, is that, again, with a couple of shoots we've worked on together, perhaps that's what the client's brief was. Look, we're remote based, so we don't have a smart head office, but the lobby of this hotel or the basement of this restaurant or the skyline of this bar, that's the type of image we want to go for. So do you not only go through the consultation, but then maybe you'll suggest and find appropriate backdrops for the client based upon the image they want to portray? And I think the second part of that question is maybe how they dress and how they prepare for that shoot themselves, because there's no point in being quite a cool, dark London lobby and then you're sat there in a three-pieced pinstripe suit. So how I guess my question is it okay to almost stage the shoot in a third-party location, even though that's not your office?
I think so, particularly if they're like a remote working company. Otherwise, I guess, how can you do that? People probably don't really want photos of them working in their house, right? That's not going to give the right image. And often many businesses will have, monthly, bi-monthly meetups somewhere. So they might have a suitable space that they're already using that they're going to suggest. So that kind of is relatable straight away. If they're not sure themselves, I can give them some ideas. Obviously, it depends geographically, sort of where they are. Finding out a bit more about their business first and how they want to look will sort of depend on, what you want to suggest. But yeah, they might absolutely have their own ideas as well. That does happen quite a lot. And then I'll work with the space that I'm in. I'll sort of look at some photos online, what it's looking like, get some ideas myself. And then when you're on location, it's about light, really, what the weather's doing sort of on the day. That means you can do sort of different things with photos. So that might influence how we make certain things look. But it also depends on the brief. So, what is the requirement from that shoot from that day? It might not just be headshots. It might be sort of working environment shots, stuff like that. Team photos, etc.
Has there been a change? I think, have you noticed in the 14 years you've been doing photography, which, let's face it, 14 years ago, I don't think Instagram existed.
It did not exist when I started. There was no Instagram.
Wasn't a thing, or maybe it would have become a thing, I'm sure, majorly. I think the style of photography, we've all become influencers, we've all got a personal brand. The selfie wasn't a word. You would take serious wedding photos, you would take serious corporate photos. Have you noticed a trend? Have you noticed a theme and a style? And if so, what's that trend? What has it become, and where do you think that style of photography is headed?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely fresher now. Everything looks fresher. Lots is just shot in nice natural light these days. So once upon a time, you probably wouldn't do a shoot unless you had all of the lights going off in all directions, and you were kind of making it look like something that it didn't necessarily look like. You were making like the perfect studio photo. And I would say that now definitely people, to make it look relatable, you want the light in the environment to look kind of like it looks. And you see that a lot. I mean, that's come through Instagram, really. I would say like people will be massively influenced by what they see through Instagram, which, like you say, when I started, that didn't exist. There was no point of reference for anything sort of inspiration wise. And, certainly websites were not really built around photography, and they weren't visual. They were just sort of there for really the core information, rather than showing the world who their brand is. So I would say that has totally changed through Instagram now. Yeah. And I think you can see from the type of sort of photography people are having, that changes. They want it to look like not necessarily an Instagram shoot, but like it can be used on Instagram, which is super important for people representing their business. So I'll often, in the shoots that we're doing, most of it is actually to use on social media. Obviously there are elements of updating websites, building new websites, etc. But they need a pool of shots that they can use to represent their business on social media. And you want that to look good on Instagram, right? That has to stand out.
It has to be authentic. We, again, in our business, we're seeing a huge trend towards more transparency, more authenticity in the way people are designing websites. Again, the sort of trend, even just 2 or 3 years ago, it was very much stock. But we wouldn't.
Yeah.
Our policy at Venn was never to try to avoid using iStock photography, and we're not always in control of that because the client can put their own photography into the website at any point. But certainly the ones that we launched, we go to third-party websites, Unsplash, and I'll come on to your opinion on that in a second. But there's definitely been a trend of the more authentic, the more real, the more honest. I think we live in a more transparent culture nowadays with top companies to work for, and the trend towards people looking at Glassdoor reviews. They want to check out the real side of a business.
Exactly, yeah.
The second trend we saw was how offices have become almost sometimes better than your home. At home, it's stunning. The amount of money that's now spent on ball swamps and slides and swings and AstroTurf in some of these offices. It's ridiculous. So they've almost become more photogenic by default. The modern office is a far cry from what the old age office was. So if anything, I think that's where we've seen more clients wanting to put forward an authentic, real,
exactly, yeah,
because they're proud of what they have, and they're proud of their people, and they're almost willing to promote who they've got and what they've got, because it becomes a more authentic brand to be associated with.
Yeah, and then that must appeal to their customers, being able to see that. If you roll back 5-10 years, none of that existed. You couldn't see that. You'd have absolutely no idea. So, how can you stand out from what is sometimes a crowd? Unless you're showing that side of you that makes you different, like what you've invested into making your environment for your staff and everything different. And I think people, you want to show that, and you want to show that in the best way possible. Really through photos and also video. Videos, just that's becoming huge now. Businesses taking that on board. So I mean, at the minute I'm working with an old traditional steel firm in Sheffield. Been going 150 years, and if you kind of go on their website, it looks like it's 150 years old, right? It's exactly what you would expect. Not inspiring. Your standard stock photos regarding steel and construction and engineering. And I'm working with those guys at the minute. So went in with the drone throughout the whole business. So they got huge warehouses where all the steel's made, which you would never see that side of them. So we've it's a project that's running over several months actually, but we're documenting their business with the drone, so you see a completely different perspective to just the photo, for example, and the drone's flying through, capturing the action and what's happening in various processes of their business. So you don't just see, a guy holding a clipboard, a photo, a man in a white suit or a hard hat or something like that. You are actually seeing inside their business and their working environment. And then that's the first thing that when people now go onto their website, they're going to see. So they're just going to be hit with that. So you're straight into the company, what the company does. You can see that straight away, how they work, the processes they have. And I think stuff like that really is, that's kind of bringing it into the modern age, isn't it? Really, so you can kind of see more about a company, and then that makes it relatable straight away, and that's going to make them stand out from their competitors.
It's more authentic. Nobody else can recreate that. That's their business. It's their history. And again, it's probably another. Again, it's a similar topic we're looking at a lot in this sort of web design we're doing at the moment. Is with our recruiters, is trying to encourage them. If it's not just about them and their story, they're working for some amazing businesses. If you're the recruitment agency behind some deep tech, biotech, medtech, fintech, cryptocurrency business, tell their story. Send Jon in and he'll go and take photos of what they're creating. Especially if you're working on something that you can take photos of, if it's devices, if it's medical devices that are maybe, again, not my world, but something really that's impactful. And if you can get a photo of that product or that machine or that environment, say, look, this is where you're going to be working, you can almost tell your client's story literally through the lens of your camera or through the drone. So I think encourage people to say, let's see beyond the job spec, see beyond I'm just trying to fill a vacancy. You're not. You're placing somebody into a role that will change somebody's life forever. It will change the outcome of their customer's life forever. It'll have an impact. So it's all about storytelling, I guess, and part of photography from the wedding day through to the work environment. It's about building a story, surely.
Yeah, no, completely. Some of the work I do as well, I've worked in the past for the Sheffield hospital and specifically the charity side of that. So their aim as a charity is to raise as much money as possible, right, for the hospital and for good causes. And for a lot of the time, you won't see sort of beyond that. You don't see the story. So I've been in there and on a number of occasions actually. And documented the patients who are in, some have got really bad things sort of going on, very raw, and capturing that and where the money is used, how that's implemented, and also documenting portraits of the doctors and consultants that are associated specifically with those areas that they're looking to raise money and improve. So you would see the whole story side of it and not just a photo of someone running, right, trying to raise some money, which is the norm. We did it very, very raw, very real, very relatable with real patients. So we just did a completely different side, and ultimately that's an advertising campaign, for them as a charity to raise money, purely just through the form of photography and nothing else. And it was hugely successful to my knowledge. So it was a good example of storytelling for not a business but a charity, and how that works for them.
Good. No, and look, I think some advice we're trying to get out the back of this podcast is to inspire people to not be afraid of investing in their own photography. I think the natural assumption is we'll take a load of photos, and then what happens if the person leaves? The money's been wasted. I think it's possibly the wrong way to look at things nowadays. There's group photos, there's team photos, there's product, there's environment, there's location, there's individual headshots. The power of the venture platform we use here at Venn and the ability to simply swap out headshots at any given point. It's not the end of the world if a colleague moves on. But I think ultimately building, again, authenticity, real people, real stories. People like to see who they're dealing with. And I think even behind some of these tech giants, you're noticing more and more they're humanizing the brand. They're actually showing who the chief exec is, who the head of people is, who the sales director is. They're still promoting these are real people behind these amazing tech businesses, and recruitment businesses should never forget that.
No, and once upon a time, you would never have seen that, right? You know that wasn't something that existed, sort of seeing that personality. But I think people can certainly take inspiration from the big brands that are already on board of this. And, even if you've got 10, 20, 30, 40 people, be influenced by that and get yourself ahead of the game compared to your competitors or whoever that might be. And start taking some inspiration from that, because they are world leaders in what they're doing, and they will get it right from the off. Huge teams of people that work on these type of things to do the right thing.
If they're looking for stocks, a bit of advice. I mean, obviously, we're here to promote real photography, and that's, that by default, what we're more passionate about. If we can afford to do it, we will do it properly and do it authentically. But if people are having to default to a stock website, is there any stock websites that you would recommend? And is there any sort of vibe or feel or look that they should be looking for to just get them away from the standard, here's a female business leader shaking the hand with a male business leader? How do we shift the dial away from a standard iStock image? If you do need to get stock, here's some advice from a professional photographer of maybe what you should be looking for.
That's a really good question. I don't use any myself. I'm not involved with any. So obviously I know iStock and Alamy and stuff like that, but I don't use them myself. So that's a really good question. For me personally, I can tell a stock image straight away, right? But that's probably from a photographer's eye, because it's made to look perfect. And for me personally, I don't think, I'm not looking for perfection, should we say? I like it to be real and relatable and authentic, which is not perfection. The two things are completely different. So I can tell when a shot's been made just purely to sell. So I don't know. I mean, maybe would my best advice be to look for something that is just slightly more real, and it doesn't look like it's been made in a studio, which a lot of it sort of has. It doesn't look like it's an actor, which again, lots of them are. And, it doesn't have, if you're a business in Manchester, right, don't buy a photo that's got perfect Californian light in the background, because those two Manchester and Californian light do not go together, right?
On that point, then, about Manchester and London skylines, it's another thing we try and encourage people to do, that geographically prove you're in that area. So if you are in wherever in London, get outside, take a camera and prove that you're actually in that location, because people may choose you, or people may choose to do business with other people in the city, or vice versa. The north, there's a passion. If you're based in Liverpool or Manchester, it shows you're genuinely there. So real, again, I don't know the right question is here, but we use a lot of abstract photography. So if somebody says they're in construction recruitment, we'll try and avoid a picture of a construction website with a big yellow crane. It's just not attractive. So I think for us, we would probably do a real close-up image of the corner of a building, going for more of an abstract photo, or maybe try and find some architecture where it just looks stunning through the lens of a camera. So again, if people were maybe thinking about appointing a photographer because they wanted a more abstract look and feel, again, what questions could they maybe ask themselves? What could they be looking for to maybe inspire that theme or that style of photography for the website?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. So one of my other passions is architecture. So it's funny that you mentioned that. I love design. I love clean, simple design. And yeah, no, I'm always personally sort of looking for that as well. I think, when you're talking about images, simple often works a lot better. Simple can be more impactful than something that's really busy with loads going on. Because, it's a lot for the brain to take in when you see things all over the place. You might, from a wedding photo, it might be different. You might want to sort of study that, and you might want to see all the people in detail and things that were happening. But to have sort of impact in a, and we're in a swipe world, right? You just get a few seconds sometimes to really stand out from the crowd. Being simple and bold will often work a lot better than loads going on. So I think, the point that you've made there, looking for those details is sometimes makes a bigger image than seeing too much. Does that make sense?
You're totally right, because remember, wedding photos, and you're right, the people's faces are front and centre. But often in web design, which is what we're talking about today, the image is a backdrop to text.
Yeah.
So your product, your services, your solution will be the text that's overlaid on top of the image. So if you've got a really busy image full of faces, the text is not going to work on top of it. And I think bold is beautiful if we can go with abstract photography that can relate to the sector, the business, the industry. Again, so whether you're in construction, medical devices, tech, education, there's all sorts of backdrops you can pick. It doesn't just have to be people's faces, right? It can maybe, you can do a deep dive and say, look, yeah, we do education recruitment, but sometimes modern schools, colleges, universities, the buildings, the architecture itself could actually be more beautiful than the headshots. So picking a more abstract theme might actually do more for your brand and get you away from the stereotypical headshots.
Yeah, I mean, you want to give people sort of like a hint or an idea of what's to come, so that they want to know more. Do you know what I mean? They want to go through more of your site. They're not just going to go next. And if they can see everything straight at once, maybe that's not the best. Maybe encourage them to come in and delve a little bit more, right? So, friends, I like cars, right? I like Lotus cars. You go on Lotus Cars website, right? You'll see bits of detail, right? Like the most intricate bits of a car, right? And it makes you want to see more of the car, right? And for that, you have to go through the site and you have to start exploring all the different areas. So, it's not just like, one intro to a picture of, there's the whole car, look at that, amazing kind of. It's not, you might see the rear lights, right? But wow, look at those look amazing. I want to see the rest of this car, right? So I'm going to explore what's within the rest of the website, and that's just one example that works really well. But it is, like you say, it's about those abstract details. Like it's about picking out the little things that make you stand out a bit more. It makes, it starts building a picture of a story for the rest of the company, right? Like the kind of what they invest into their engineering, for example, like not just, oh, look, hey, we built a car. Like,
no, and that is a guilty thing within recruitment. If we say we're in mining recruitment, you will literally see the picture of a big dirty mine, which is fundamentally a hole in the ground with a big yellow truck. It's just not creative. It's not inspiring. And the truth is, that's not the truth. I think some of the mining industry is all about renewable electrification, decarbonisation. That's big data. There's a lot goes into the mining sector now. So we can't literally just choose the first mining image we see. And if we do need to focus on mining, again, there's a lot of very clever abstract photography out there that's slightly more beautiful and inspiring than maybe the first one you see on Getty.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So go for stuff like that instead. Don't just go for something that isn't you and your brand, right? And your company, you can certainly pick out, yes, there's the smaller details and use those far easier than, the picture of the CEO shaking someone's hand, that's not your CEO, right? You'll get away with things a lot more if you use in stock photography by picking out the more simple images.
No, look good. So I think just to sort of round up where we're concluding on this point, I think the time, if you look back at the timeline of photography, there's no question 14 years ago, it wasn't really a thing. And any photography that was going onto a website was stock or serious. I think we're now in a generation where my takeaway from this conversation is there's never been a better time to invest in real professional photography because it's authentic. You've got real people with really interesting stories. You've probably got offices that are beautiful, and some people's offices are, certainly mine are, nicer than my home. So I think there's kind of more of a brand strategy play here going on. Photography can turn into videography, which can be turned into drones.
Yep.
So I think technology's enabled things to move on quite quickly.
Yeah, very fast, yeah.
I think with third-party platforms nowadays, recruiters have to think about LinkedIn through to their website, through to other social platforms. So posting headshots is one thing, but maybe finding more inspiring photography to get people's attention. I think you're bang on, John. We've got a very short window to create a first impression. So the importance of picking the right catalogue of on-brand photography. I think one thing we do worry about is we pass the baton to the next marketing manager, perhaps. We spend a fortune doing the photo shoot. doing the website, passing over the website design to that new custodian, and the marketing manager has no brand guidelines and therefore starts flooding the website with stock photography all over again.
Yep.
So again, how important is it that if we're to leave people with a bit of a takeaway from this conversation, what's a bit of a checklist? And I'm putting you on the spot here, but what could they consider? What should they consider when it comes to appointing a photographer? If there's sort of 4 or 5 takeaways that through the eyes of a professional, what should they consider? What should they plan and think about before they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, ultimately they've got to understand where they want to go, right? So what's the idea for the shoot, the photography that they need? That's number one. You've got to have a clue of what your goal is, right? What are you using it for? Is it, for your website, for social media? Is it just to update the latest stuff? What's the point? Or are you looking to sell more, to tell the world more about you? Because then that's story related. So number one is that the business company needs to have an idea of a goal for what they're looking to achieve. And then from there, you can sort of make more of a plan. So, that ultimately is then going to affect the location for where you're doing things, the content, who's in there, which people are going to be in these photos, if people at all. Or are we talking about, right, we just want some really strong abstract details of our building to really show off sort of who we are and what we've invested in. It's a variety of things, really. So I think, understanding the goal, understanding how the importance of the location. So do we need to represent London? Do we need to represent Manchester or Glasgow or wherever we are? Do we want to look global in New York City? What's the goal ultimately? Budgets, how much are people looking to spend on this, because that is important. If you've got a large company with lots to document and you're wanting video and full profiles of all staff, etc., you've got to have the budget obviously to do that. So I'd say that's one thing to understand as well. But most importantly, like sort of what they want to get out of it, and then that's going to lead sort of what happens with the photo shoots. And I'll liaise with the companies from there just to kind of discuss things a little bit more, and I'll give them my ideas as well, how I think I could help them grow through photos. What the style is going to be that's kind of going to suit them. Maybe they suit something that's a bit more staged. Maybe they suit something that's more abstract. Maybe they suit something that's just real, lively, modern, fresh, bold. It really depends. So having an understanding from both sides of like where they want to be. They might feel like they need a full image rebrand, right, of their whole company. And, maybe they feel like on their current website, they look dated and boring and dull. And they want to bring themselves into the real world now and relate with people through Instagram, etc., and have the type of images that are going to work on that, because dull and flat and colorless stuff is not going to work particularly well if you're sharing it on social media, right? So I think understanding the goal is like the main thing that I would say, that they need to understand that process themselves and then come forwards with that, and then we take it from there.
Good. No, brilliant advice. I think planning is everything. We can't do things by chance. So planning the look and feel, it can ultimately change. And again, we're promoting a lot to our clients now that even though the photography is beautiful, swap it out every 3 months. Try and treat this website like an e-commerce. Right. There's 4 seasons in the year, and why can't there be 4 top banners onto your website? So throughout the year, we keep it fresh, if anything, to keep our interest, to keep our audience engaged and interested,
particularly the ones that are coming back, which is what you want. You want people coming back. You don't want them to be one-hit wonders on your website, right? You want that.
That's the fear. People get so wedded to that one, but we love the picture of that building and we love the picture of that team. They can come back next season, but they're only featured in the first 3 months of the year. So we are encouraging people to lean into more authenticity, be real, have real photos, because there are some amazing businesses out there doing amazing things, and behind every great business is a great person. So I think
they need representing the right way, right? I mean,
completely. I mean, it's International Women's Day today, but there's some amazing women doing amazing things. So why can't we get behind the scenes and take photos of them doing their jobs? And people just never think about it. But ultimately, it's great for their personal brand. It's potentially great for their career. And hey, what a privilege that if your business is willing to put people on that pedestal and show off your talent, that says a lot about you as an organisation. So, look, Jon, thank you for your time. It's been brilliant. I think, yet again, it's been another insightful podcast, just hopefully trying to inspire people to break away from the shackles of perceived web design, and actually, whether you're going out to a professional podcaster, whether you're going out to become a B Corp, or whether you want to appoint a professional photographer like Jon, you can reach out to Venn. We'll put you in contact with Jon. He'll be listed on the Venture platform relatively soon. And yeah, look, get Jon into your business, give him a bit of a brief and see what he comes back with. So thank you, everybody, for attending once again. Thank you to Jon for your time. And we'll chat to you soon.
Lovely. Thank you, Brian. Cheers.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.